History tells us that walls were built to keep enemies out. It seems like a simple, obvious strategy for survival. Build a wall, protect a city, and live to see another day. That is the traditional narrative we have inherited. Except, history does not quite agree with that simple premise. The greatest walls ever built were eventually crossed. Babylon fell to invaders. The Great Wall of China was breached. Rome's vast frontiers ultimately collapsed under pressure. Even the oldest fortified cities were eventually abandoned. If walls failed to stop empires from falling, why keep building? For thousands of years, historians have searched for an answer. But what if we have been asking the wrong question? Perhaps walls were never really built to keep enemies out. Maybe they were built to create civilization itself. Nearly 10,000 years ago, long before pyramids or pharaohs, a small settlement called Jericho did something unprecedented. Its people built an enormous stone wall. For generations, historians assumed it was a fortress built against external danger. It seemed like a simple case of cause and effect. Danger existed, so they built protection. But archaeology tells a different story. There is surprisingly little evidence of a great invading army at the time. The reality is far more complicated. Some researchers believe the wall protected the settlement from seasonal floods. Others think it marked sacred, ritual ground. Some argue it simply demonstrated the community's wealth and organization. No one knows for certain, but the theories align. Every theory points to the same surprising idea. The wall was not just separating people from physical danger, it was separating a community from the world around it. For the first time, there was an inside and an outside. That invisible, conceptual idea would eventually shape every civilization that followed in human history. Thousands of years later, Babylon pushed that idea further than anyone before. Its walls became the stuff of legend. Ancient writers claimed they were so massive that chariots raced across their tops. Those accounts were likely exaggerated, but the exaggeration was not the point. Imagine approaching Babylon after weeks of crossing empty, desolate plains. Long before you meet a soldier or enter a gate, you see walls unlike anything you have ever imagined. At that moment, the city has already won. Without speaking a word, it has convinced you that Babylon is powerful. The walls were not simply military structures. They were psychological weapons designed to project absolute authority. Stone became a language. Every block declared to the observer, "We are organized, we are wealthy, we are stronger." Perhaps the greatest purpose of Babylon's walls was not stopping an invasion, but preventing anyone from believing one was possible. Then Rome did something even stranger. Instead of just surrounding a city, it stretched a wall across an entire landscape. When Emperor Hadrian ordered his famous wall in northern Britain, Rome already controlled an empire spanning 3 continents. Its armies were unmatched, and its engineering astonished the world. Surely this wall existed to keep enemies away. Except, people crossed it every day. Merchants, officials, messengers, and travelers moved through the gates constantly. Hadrian's wall was not sealed. It was controlled. Rome was not trying to stop movement, but deciding who could move. Trade passed through the gates. Taxes were collected. Goods were inspected. Information flowed in both directions. Suddenly, the wall looks very different. It was not simply a barrier. It was a filter for the Roman Empire. Rome had discovered something every great civilization would eventually learn. Power is not controlling everything, but controlling access. Centuries later, China faced a different challenge. Nomadic horsemen could appear almost anywhere across vast northern frontiers. Different kingdoms built different defensive walls. Over hundreds of years, those walls expanded, connected, and were rebuilt. What we now call the Great Wall is really the work of many dynasties solving the same persistent problem. But here is what makes it fascinating. The Great Wall never completely stopped invasions. History records armies crossing it. They bribed guards or found unprotected routes. Yet, emperors kept rebuilding it. Why did they persist? Because the wall was not only defending land, it was defining civilization itself. On one side, there were fields, cities, laws, and imperial authority. On the other, a different way of life. The wall became a visible statement of identity. It answered a question every civilization eventually asks: who are we, and where do we end? By now, a pattern begins to emerge across Jericho, Babylon, Rome, and China. Different cultures, different continents, different centuries, yet all arrived at remarkably similar ideas about boundaries. Walls create boundaries. Boundaries create identity. Identity creates civilization. It is a fundamental human cycle. Without a boundary, a city is simply a collection of buildings. Without a shared identity, an empire is just territory. Perhaps walls never protected civilizations. Perhaps in a deeper sense, they created them. Then, history changed. Cannons made city walls obsolete. Ships sailed around them, and aircraft flew over them. Technology moved faster than stone ever could. Ancient walls slowly lost their military value over time. Yet, humanity never stopped building boundaries. Today, they appear as border fences, immigration checkpoints, and customs gates. Even digital firewalls protect information instead of cities. The materials changed, but the purpose remains remarkably familiar. Every society still decides who belongs, who enters, and where the boundary lies in the modern world. Maybe that is why walls appear throughout human history. Not because civilizations were afraid, but because they define limits. Every civilization must answer the same timeless question: where does our world begin, and where does it end? And we are still building the walls that define our world, just as we have for 10,000 years.